Catholic Moments, Episode 103, A Conversation with the Deacons.
Finding joy in the journey and hope in the heaven yet to come.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Moments. And now, here's your host and my mom, Lisa Hendy.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everyone to another episode of Catholic Moments, the show from CatholicMom.com, where we talk about all things faith, family, and fun from a Catholic perspective. This week's show features a conversation with two of my favorite deacons, Deacon Tom Fox and Deacon Chuck Stevens, and we'll be centering our discussion around the Permanent Diaconate. Many of our listeners, a good handful of our listeners, have been in touch with us recently about their interest in learning more about the diaconate, so we thought it would be great to have a conversation about all the ins and outs of being a permanent deacon and how these two great men found their vocations and what their daily walk with the Lord as a permanent deacon is like. So I'm looking forward to sharing that conversation with you a little bit later in the show. And I will warn you that it's a little bit longer interview than we normally do, but we were just having such a great chat that I couldn't cut it off. So this might be a two-parter for you. You might want to pause the podcast midway through and come back and join us later on. I know you're going to love the conversation, though. And first off, we're going to start off with feedback from some of our listeners.
Hi, Lisa. It's Joe McLean from the Catholic Hack Podcast. Hey, listen, I'm a little late on this. I just wanted to say congratulations on your 100th episode. Having a brand new newborn at the house has really thrown the schedule way off, so I do apologize for that. And I just wanted to tell you that your work in Catholic New Media has really been inspiring, and it's been a great addition, the last 100 episodes, to the realm of Catholic podcasting. And so I just want to congratulate you on that and just say, job well done. Please keep it up. You know, you are just moving the ball forward and giving us all a high mark to shoot for. And so we really appreciate that. I want to see more from you and CatholicMom.com and all the endeavors that you're currently involved in, and just encourage everyone to plug in and listen to what's going on at Catholic Moments Podcast. I'll talk to you soon, Lisa. May God richly bless you. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for that, Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I know what is a very busy schedule for you these days with what's going on at home and all the great work that you're doing to prepare so many great Catholic conferences out there. You can listen to Joe at his podcast, The Catholic Hack, and you can visit him at thecatholichack.com, and we'll have a link to that in our show notes. He's a good friend, and I'm looking forward to seeing Joe and a lot of my other podcasting friends at this year's Catholic New Media celebration coming up in June 27th to be exact. And I hope you'll consider possibly joining us for that day. It's down in San Antonio, Texas. I'll be there for about 4 days, taking in the sights and enjoying the weekend's conference activities. We're going to have a great dinner, special mass, and an opening reception, and all kinds of great things. So if you would like more information about that, you can find that in the show notes, or head over to celebration.sqpn.com. And thanks again to Joe for your well wishes and greetings, and it's always great to hear your voice, Joe.
Hi, Lisa. My name is Mary McCarthy, and I'm calling from Minnesota. And I've been listening to your podcast for a few weeks now, and I befriended you on Facebook. And I just wanted to call to let you know that there's an upcoming event in Minnesota that some of your listeners may want to go to. It's the 11th Annual Minnesota Catholic Home Education Conference and also Curriculum Fair. And our main speaker this year is Mary Beth Hicks, and I just listened to her interview on your show, and I'm really looking forward to reading that book. But anyways, I thought some of your listeners might be interested in going, and actually we did not homeschool this year, but we've been going to this conference for probably 6 years now. So many great talks on parenting and living out virtues in marriage and just lots of great stuff. So thanks so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Hey, Mary, thanks for the heads up. That sounds like a terrific conference. I would be willing to fly to Minnesota just for the opportunity to see Mary Beth Hicks. She is such a fabulous author and a great speaker, too. So you're going to have a terrific time at that conference. I'm going to try to track down the link for the conference in Minnesota for the show notes. And if I'm successful, you'll find it at CatholicMoments.com or SQPN.com in our show notes. And I hope everybody living in that area will check out that conference. Moments, because I'm telling you, the chance to see Mary Beth Hicks in person is a real treat. So good luck with that. And if you have an event or a conference coming up or something happening in your parish or diocese you'd like to spread the word about, drop a line to our voice feedback line, and you can reach that number at 206-339-9272, and you'll always find that number listed on any of the websites where you listen to Catholic Moments. So CatholicMom.com, SQPN.com, all the other places where you tune in to listen. If you forget the voice feedback line, you can find it in any of those places. And next up, let's hear from our good friend, Sarah Reinhardt, with her Mary Moments. I want to let you know there's a little bit of an echo in the middle of this week's Mary Moment, but the content of this message from Sarah is so wonderful, and I really want to thank her for making the time in her schedule to do this. She's had a busy week this week. She's been guest blogging over at our faithandfamilylive.com blog and is running a Mary Moments Carnival of her own on her website. So I really appreciate her reflection for this weekend. Can't wait to share it with you. Here's Sarah and Elizabeth.
Hello, my name's Elizabeth.
And my name's Sarah Reinhardt. It's time for Mary Moment. A lot of us struggle with devotion to Mary. I thought during this week's Mary Moment, I would share an excerpt from Paul VI's 1974 Apostolic Exhortation, Marialis Cultus. I apologize if my Latin pronunciation is subpar. This section addresses concerns that Mary is an outdated example for modern women. The picture of the Blessed Virgin, presented in a certain type of devotional literature, cannot easily be reconciled with today's lifestyle, especially the way women live today. In the home, women's equality and co-responsibility with man in the running of the family are being justly recognized by laws and the evolution of customs. In the sphere of politics, women have in many countries gained a position in public life equal to that of men. In the social field, women are at work in a whole range of different employments, getting further away every day from the restricted surroundings of the home. In the cultural field, new possibilities are opening up for women in scientific research and intellectual activities. In consequence of these phenomena, some people are becoming disenchanted with devotion to the Blessed Virgin and finding it difficult to take as an example Mary of Nazareth, because the horizons of her life, so they say, seem rather restricted in comparison with the vast spheres of activity open to mankind today. In this regard, we exhort theologians, those responsible for the local Christian communities, and the faithful themselves to examine these difficulties with due care. This is something I have struggled with reconciling internally and explaining to others. How exactly do I relate to a young girl, probably only a teenager when she was first pregnant, who, though sharing the vocation of motherhood, differs from me in background, experience, and all sorts of other ways? Just what do we have in common? How can she teach me things that are specifically useful to my modern way of living? A helpful image for me is one of Mary in an apron, dressed in jeans and a comfortable pair of shoes and a t-shirt. I try to imagine her in my kitchen, right beside me while I am scrambling to get dinner ready. When I'm tucking my kids in at night, and especially when one of them is fussy, I try to think about how Mary must have held Jesus, and how, really, that isn't so different from what I'm doing. Oh, we don't have similar cultures, not at all. We grew up with different sorts of parents, with different understandings of the world. But Mary has more in common with me than not. She struggled against the cultural norm, battled the greatest injustice ever to happen, and she did it with humility and grace. I could learn a thing or two from Mary after all. Next week, I'll share another quote from Marialis Cultus. In the meantime, you may want to look it up and read it for yourself. I promise that it's not hard reading. You may be surprised at what a gem it is, in fact. We'll have links in the show notes. Until next week, my friends, may Mary hold you close and lead you ever closer to her Son.
Thank you so much for that reflection, Sarah. You know, your Mary moments have already become just such a special thing to me each week. Hearing your voice and hearing your personal reflections on your own relationship with Mary has caused me to think a lot about my own, and I want to thank you for your contribution to the show. And next up, I am very happy to share with you a conversation with two fantastic permanent deacons. The first is our own Deacon Tom Fox, who you hear here on Catholic Moments every week with his reflections, and also our good friend Deacon Chuck Stevens. And you might know Deacon Chuck from his music. He's a prolific musician and has just recently released his latest CD. And before we get into the conversation, I wanted to share with you my favorite song from that CD and let you enjoy a little bit of Deacon Chuck's music before we get into the chat. So here's Deacon Chuck and Deacon Tom.
As light as the whisper of a butterfly's wings is the weight of the burden that Jesus' love brings. As sweet and as joyful as a baby's first smile is the heart that says yes to his calling. There's a warmth and a stirring that can't be ignored in the depths of a soul that's been kissed by the Lord. And so, my prayer for you, as you follow his will, may the blessings of God rest upon you. Oh, may the blessings of God rest upon you.
Next up on today's episode of Catholic Moments, I am so pleased to share a conversation with two of my favorite people and favorite deacons. We're gathering from across two countries to have this conversation today, and joining me are our own Deacon Tom Fox and also Deacon Chuck Stevens. And I'd like to thank both of you for being here today, and just ask Deacon Chuck, would you briefly introduce yourself to our listening audience?
Sure, Lisa. Thanks for having me. As you introduced me, I'm Deacon Chuck Stevens. I'm in Canada, actually in the Diocese of London, Ontario, which is in the central part of Canada. If people look at their maps, they'll see the Great Lakes. And, we're in this little shape of the elephant, kind of, I guess, about an hour for American geography, about an hour north of Detroit. I've been an ordained deacon now for almost 2 years. My wife, Kathy, and I have 5 children. One is grown and off to university, another one waiting in the wings for university, and the other 3, 2 in high school, and one just going into junior high. My liturgical ministry is at St. Philip's Parish, which is a small rural parish in a little place called Petrolia, and actually serves a large area in our county. So I'm pretty much kept on the move all the time, but I have absolutely no regrets in being in ordained service to our Lord and his people, and I'd do it again tomorrow.
And Deacon Chuck, we also need to have you on at some point in the future to talk about your music ministry, to focus on that, which could be a whole show in and of itself. But I hope that you'll give us permission to listen to a couple of your songs during the course of this show as well. So,
well, Lisa, you've got my permission to use anything I've got for you anytime. This goes way back, and you already know that, so you don't even have to ask.
Great. Deacon Tom, our listeners are familiar with your voice, but may not necessarily know about your family. So why don't you just briefly introduce yourself for our listeners?
Thanks. I share my Thanksgiving for the great joy of working with you for what seems like a year and a half, Lisa, and getting to know some of the people that you know and serve through Catholic Mom and Catholic Moments. Well, I came out of the Midwest. Dee and I, my wife Dee, and I met in Washington, D.C. We've been married for a long time. We have 4 grown children, adults now. And Dee and I probably got the call about the diaconate. It started, I would say, for me in Florida, and there was a wonderful Irish priest, somewhat like the brogue I remember hearing when you interviewed Monsignor Collins.
Yes.
a wonderful priest in
We're
Florida.
partial to those.
Yeah, exactly. And that didn't work out, and then we moved to Colorado, and I was in Colorado for 9 years. Dee and I were there, and I got involved in the diaconate program there. I guess we're going to talk about that for a few moments later, but I got involved in that, and I was ordained by Archbishop Charles Chaput in June of 2004, and we now live in Arizona. We're in Payson, Arizona, and I heard Chuck say his parish name. I kind of did a double take. Our parish name is St. Philip the Apostle, and I serve locally here under the bishop of the Tucson Diocese and for the pastor of this parish. And as you probably know, Lisa, I've also gotten involved in a fair amount of internet activities and have enjoyed working in that area of ministry as well.
It has been a huge outreach, I think, that you've undergone in the last year and a half or so, and it's been really exciting to be a part of that. Deacon Chuck, would you share with us a little bit about your call to the Permanent Diaconate and how you sensed a vocation in your own life?
Well, I think, as Deacon Tom will probably agree with me, I would expect, and anybody else who has entered into any kind of vocation, but more particularly, I think, the Permanent Diaconate, it's not just a matter of the movement of the Spirit, of feeling that interior calling or recognizing it immediately, but also recognizing that God speaks to us through other people and other circumstances as well. And through the course of my life, and again, this is all in hindsight, of course, you have to understand.
Yes.
Particularly during what we refer to as the long retreat, the canonical retreat that we're required to undergo before the call to order. So it's an 8-day silent retreat. In particular, that's when I really had the chance to look back and recognize, sort of all the gears locking into place, recognizing that God had called me to this even before I was born, which may sound, rather flighty and like pie in the sky to some listeners, but I can't stress other than to say it really is true. It really does happen like that eventually if you listen long enough. But through my adult life, working and because I was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and as a result of that occupation, we transferred around a lot as a family. We moved in different parts of the country, different parishes, and in some dioceses, I was encountering permanent deacons, and they had an impact, an influence on my life. Anytime there was really a life-changing phase, I guess I would say, during our movement around the country, there always seemed to be a permanent deacon in the background. When Kathy and I took our marriage preparation course back in St. John in New Brunswick, which is on the East Coast, it was presented by a permanent deacon and his wife. When I graduated from high school and had my first real paying job, my employer was actually was entering into the permanent diaconate in the diocese I was living in at that time. I did a peacekeeping tour in Bosnia with the UN, and one of the guys in my contingent, it ended up being my best friend during a tour of duty, was in his third year of studies for the permanent diaconate. So there was all of this in the background, and just this gentle nudging, I suppose. God saying, "Are you listening?"
A recurring theme going on there.
Yeah, there was. It was quite funny actually, because when we transferred into this particular area, I'd been in this parish about a year, and they were just introducing the diaconate program into this diocese, so there wasn't even anybody in formation at that point. I approached the pastor and I said to him, what do you think about this idea of the permanent diaconate? And he's a very plain-spoken fellow, and we've become fast friends. But at the time, he just kind of looked at me and he said, "Well, in my opinion, that's the diocese trying to get economy priests for the price of a hockey stick and a beer."
Oh.
and that's a direct quote, and he, you know, I've repeatedly quoted that, and he's lived to regret that. But what was quite funny was you know, I took that to mean, well, okay, you know, not interested, best not go there right now. But about 6 months later, he approached me, and he said, "Are you still interested in this Permanent Diaconate program?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Well, let's start inquiring and filling out some paperwork." And so I just took that as the movement of the Spirit. If God had not wanted me to go there, I don't think God would have led him there either.
You know, Chuck, I don't remember the first time that you and I conversed by email, but it's been years now, and I sort of was able to kind of be a witness to your formation process, because we actually, I think, met online before you actually, maybe right at the start of your beginning of your diaconate program.
Yeah, actually, it was at the end of the first year of studies, because that's when, after that retreat, when the music ministry started developing, and you and I started in contact. Actually, me, you know, being the fan from a distance, writing to you and saying, "Did I send you some stuff?"
Which I've always loved, and I'm one of your biggest fans, I think. Deacon Tom, so let's just transition now to talking about sort of the process. Now, not knowing about this, because I haven't gone through it myself, or my husband hasn't, is the formation process for deacons, Permanent Diaconate, consistent across the country, or does it vary by diocese?
It does vary by diocese. Each bishop has the shepherd responsibility for all of the parishes within his diocese or archdiocese, and he would establish a process. So you might hear in one diocese of a program being 2 or 3 years. In the Archdiocese of Denver, where I was and took all my formation, the program is a little over 4 years, and the first year is sort of a year of thinking, praying, and starting your studies, and then there's a little liturgical act that the church goes through to install you as a candidate in that diocese, and for me there was 3 additional years for my wife and I. I want to say about my wife,
yes,
what a wonderful partner she was in this. She was able, willing, and anxious to go to every one of the classes, every one of the spiritual formation weekends, every one of the retreats that we went on. Not all wives are able to do that, perhaps because of young children or jobs or whatever, but it was great having my wife with me in this. And it has helped to really reshape our marriage a lot as well. And
can you clarify for me now? A deacon can obviously be married. Both of you are married. I want to give some basic information for people that might not be that familiar with the diaconate program. You know, what are some of the prerequisites that might be out there, Deacon Tom?
Well, one of the early things, and a thing that I heard a lot, was to be open to be molded, to be poured into and configured to a mold of Christ. And so, you know, there's a great change in perhaps spiritual practice, in your way of thinking. There's, you know, spiritual formation and things you go through that are part of the process, and I think it really changes a person, and someone should be open to expect change. The joke that many of us had was the first year, you know, I wish God would hurry up and make me a deacon because I'm just so ready. And the second year thinking, gosh, there's a lot of material I'm learning here. Third year was, oh, please, don't tell me we're going to be ordained next year. And then the fourth year, of course, it was there. And if I have time for just a quick story, I want to share
Sure, that'd be great.
Archbishop Chaput asked we deacon candidates the morning of our ordination to meet with him, our wives and we men, to meet with him for a private breakfast. And we did this down in the basement of the cathedral where we were ordained later that morning. And I so much remember how wonderful he was, saying, you know, if you think you're not worthy, you aren't worthy, and I'm not worthy to be the bishop but the church has looked at you and the church has decided, and we believe the Holy Spirit is involved in this, and Jesus wants you to be a deacon. It took a great weight off of my shoulders, and it made me so wonderfully happy to have him later, a couple hours later, lay hands on my head as he ordained me.
I'm sure that sense of, will you ever really be ready to take this on, is a huge thing. Deacon Chuck, what was your formation process, and did it vary at all from Deacon Tom's?
There was a little bit of variation. I mean, what Deacon Tom was talking about are, the basic formation. I think it's all pretty much the same. I mean, the norms coming out of Rome really call for formation everywhere to encompass a period of 5 years. So, again, if you're talking, in some places they include your year of as an inquirer as part of your formation year. For myself, there was the year of inquiry. There was 4 years of study, and then that trickled over maybe 3 or 4 months after that, so that we were still completing like our canon law oral exams, and then the call to orders and the application for that. So although our fourth academic year really kind of ended in June, there was still some continuation of that. Our exams were in September, and ordination was in November of that year. But the year of inquiry here in our diocese, it's during this application process, and it's also part of the discernment process, even discerning whether or not to try to enter into the diaconal formation program. There are 2 dates during the year where the inquirers would come with their spouses, and actually it's at the St. Peter's Seminary in London for a day, and they're given some reading material and prayer and Eucharist and just this whole mode of trying to discern exactly what it is God is calling you to, and is it towards this direction, towards the permanent diaconate. After that period of time, it's an extensive application process, including psychological testing and medical tests and all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, then you're notified whether you're accepted for admission into the program. At the end of each year of formation, there's also a discernment on the part of the formation team, and they basically vote on the candidates whether to allow them to continue or to invite them to perhaps defer or withdraw from the program. So it's not just this sort of thing where I think I'll be a deacon and it's another job, quote unquote, within the church structure, or it's another lay position, because you're not super lay people. This whole formation program and discernment also draws you into and calls you into this reformation, this fluidity that Deacon Tom was talking about. One of our directors at the seminary referred to it as rigid flexibility. But that's being molded. You would think at this point in your life, I mean, we're talking men between the ages of 35 and 60 who are stable in their marriages. It's not like you can get married at 34 and then enter into the program at 35, right, because within our diocese they would not even allow that. Or again, if you're a neophyte, if you just converted, let's say through RCIA, and within a year you want to become a deacon, you can't.
You need to have had some solid years of living a Catholic family life within the church.
Exactly. So there's all of that to be considered into it, and this idea though that you would think that after a career as either a policeman or a doctor or a lawyer or what have you, that you're pretty much set in your ways, and it's amazing how that mindset, even if you enter into it with that mindset, you're pretty much dead in the water. Because this idea that, and I like St. Teresa of Avila. She's one of my favorites, but one of the things that she wrote, even in terms of spiritual development, was that when it comes to prayer, we're always beginners. and it's the same thing with formation. No matter how much you learn or think you know, there is so much more to know. And the one thing that I did learn very much from not just the formation process itself, but when we have a pastoral outreach in our second year, which is not connected directly to a church or a parish, I was in a nursing home. It was the last place I wanted to go. It was not within my comfort level. But before the year was out, I thought, I love this. This is wonderful. This is great. I'm so glad, quote unquote, that I did this. But it was more God, drawing me into this and me saying yes. But what I have found through that experience and subsequent experiences, that if you feel completely comfortable in doing something for God, that's probably not where God wants you to be. If there is some level of discomfort in following what you perceive or discern God is calling you to, that's actually a good thing, because if you're not in your comfort zone, you have to trust somebody, and he's the one that you're supposed to trust.
I find great hope in that, because I spend a lot of the time every day out of my comfort zone doing things that I think, okay, God, why me to do this? And I think those are words of wisdom for anyone, not just those considering the life of a deacon, really for any of us, and looking to pick up an evangelical role in our lives or to be a witness to Christ, that getting out of that comfort zone may be a good thing. It's hard, though.
Can I interject something, please?
Please do.
Chuck, you hit on something, and I'd like to be able to recall exactly what it was that made me think of this, but the point I wanted to make is that I applied for the Diaconate twice. The first time I went through all of the forms and paperwork and references and all of that, and received a letter, very unexpectedly received a letter, which said, we basically have looked at you, and the board has recommended that you not be considered for entrance into the program. But my first reaction was, how dare they?
Mm-hmm.
How dare they? And I think that was the beginning of one of the lessons that, this is God's work. It isn't my work. It isn't my thinking. It isn't what I want to do. And I can tell you that this education has continued ever since then. Thank God I was admitted a year later.
And perhaps that has colored your ministry a little bit, having maybe even making you more grateful for the role that you have, because you had to wait a bit for it. Deacon Tom, can you tell us what a day in the life of a permanent deacon looks like in your diocese? What are some of the roles that you're carrying out, and what is a typical week like for you?
Well, it has varied because I've been in two parishes, and so the parish has some construct in the work. I was in a resort community that had a lot of marriages that took place in our parish, marriages that by and large originated from other areas. I was involved in pre-marriage work a lot there. I've also done there, and now in Arizona, a lot of annulment work, helping people who are seeking an annulment of an earlier marriage. I am usually on the altar for a week at a time, and every weekend. During Lent, I taught a class on confession, a 2-night class on confession and reconciliation. I think the things that I just baptized a young girl, an 8-year-old girl, a couple weekends ago, and I did a column for Catholic Mom.
Yes, you can read that on CatholicMom.com.
And I was just so wonderfully touched to be a part of the joy of that day. My wife and I, Dee and I, recently met for breakfast with a couple that I had married about a year and a half ago. Their parents were with the couple that I married, and I just can't tell you how tender it was to be with them and to share, again, the joy of the work that we did. So I guess I'm not giving you a very concise answer.
No, that's great. That gives us an overview. How about you, Deacon Chuck? What are some of the roles that you play in your parish and some of the functions that you carry out in your day-to-day life as a deacon?
Well, again, mine would be somewhat different than Deacon Tom's, given the geography of where I am. But our diocese encompasses large cities and small rural communities as well. So a lot of my brother deacons that were ordained even in my class, have a specific outreach. They're working at a soup kitchen or a food bank during, within the hours, as well as their liturgical ministry. For myself, again, most of my outreach outside of the boundaries of the parish is involved in nursing homes still, as well as hospitals. I'm involved in a lot of catechesis, working with youth, both of the senior public school age and our high school youth, in terms of youth groups, etc. A lot of catechetical stuff, baptismal prep, our CIA program, and during the week I'm also presiding over things like Liturgy of the Hours in one smaller community, which is north of here. It's about a half-hour drive from where I live. But other things evolved from that, and spread out from that, of course, from the liturgical side of things, at all of our masses on the weekend, of course, assisting our pastor. There is the baptism of children, which has proven to be, I think, a great help to my pastor as well, because, again, he's not from this community, and when he would like to be able to travel home and see his family on occasion, his parents, that also allows him to do that as well, because there's someone here who can baptize babies as well, being the permanent deacon. Funerals conducted outside of the Mass, marriages outside of the Mass, convalidations. But again, that has led into other things as well, because it's a rural parish. It's not as convenient or easy for people to just drop by for group activities or to just walk down to your parish church that happens to be in your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what I do involves traveling out into the country, in the county, to visit people. It may very well be, baptismal preparation. It may very well be marriage prep, aside from the marriage prep classes and things like that. What I've found is that more and more, and even my pastor has commented on this as time has gone on, that there's a comfort level in some circumstances, more so with talking to a permanent deacon than with a priest. And that's not a slight against anybody on either side. It's just, in some cases, some people are more comfortable talking about marriage to somebody who is married. Somebody is more comfortable talking to someone who has a mortgage and is facing home repairs or going out working a 9-to-5 job or even shift work, because it's this sense of, well, I don't have to explain this to you. You already know where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
And so that in itself opens doors, but it's all of this idea that you're configured to Christ the servant. Whether it's in your outreach, whether it's in your liturgical ministry, that people see you as assisting, not so much as running the show.
Right.
And that also, again, can't help but spread out even in your home life. You may think you're really well established and settled in your home life with your wife, with your children, but you quickly learn that even at that, I mean, the graces of ordination flow in and through all of the three stages or parts of the ministry of the deacon, whether it's as the outreach servant or preaching the word, or as a liturgical minister.
And that call to truly be a servant and to truly be obedient is definitely something that I think people need to consider when they're considering the vocation. What you said about not running the show, not that I think I can do this better than my pastor, so I'm going to get up there, but how can I serve my parish is really probably a very huge thing.
Yeah, and if there's something that I could also just interject here, and I know this is mildly off topic, but not really, because, I mean, you hear it on different radio programs. I've certainly encountered it on different radio talk shows and things, is if people have an axe to grind against, say, a particular bishop in a particular diocese or a whole group of bishops in a whole area, and there's a point that they disagree with the bishop on,
mm-hmm.
and they'll ask a deacon or they'll ask a priest for their opinion on that, and what they may not realize that they're doing is that they're putting that deacon or that priest in an extremely difficult position, even asking that question, because at your ordination, one of the things that happens at ordination is, you fold your hands, the bishop puts his hands around yours, and he looks you straight in the eye, and he says, do you promise obedience and respect to me and my successors? And that's, whether you're being ordained as a permanent or transitional deacon, that's a promise of obedience, and that's
yes.
a promise before God and the church for life. So when people say, well, I don't agree with what that bishop said, what do you think? And obviously, if you say, well, I agree with the bishop or I don't agree with the bishop, you've just put yourself as a deacon, as an ordained minister who has made that promise before God and the church in a very difficult position.
Words of wisdom for all of us when we're having conversations with deacons. I think that's really, to discuss how the vow is lived out in day-to-day life, that's really one of the things to consider.
Well, I really think it would be no different than if somebody that works, say, with my wife disagreed with something that my wife said or did,
mm-hmm.
and then came to me and complained about it and said, what do you think? The reality of my marriage, if there's something that I disagree with my wife on, I'm going to discuss that with my wife.
Right.
I'm not going to air that in a public forum. And really, I know it may not be an exact analogy, but it's very close. It's very much the same thing. Once you're ordained, you may have your first vocation as your sacramental marriage to your spouse, but in a sense, you are married to the church now.
Deacon Tom, what are some of the things that, as we close out the conversation, I'm watching the time and I'm very frustrated that I can't have 3 or 4 hours with the two of you because I think we could benefit from that. But hopefully this is just an introductory conversation. But Deacon Tom, what are some of the things that you want people to know as they are considering a possible vocation to the permanent diaconate? Maybe some thoughts or some words of inspiration that you could offer, or things that you wish you might have known in that process.
Well, the one thing that Chuck has so well said is that it isn't our plan, it isn't our idea of what we can do and contribute. Just restating that, it's God's work, it's Christ's plan, and how can I subordinate myself to that? At the front end, we don't know. I would have never thought some of the things that I'm doing or involved in would have been things that I would have had any knowledge of quite a while ago. I guess if someone would just say, I'll be open, I'll be docile to the process. I will allow corrections to take place. I'll listen to the wisdom of people who've been doing this for a lot of years. Those would be attributes. Make sure that the wife is a willing partner in this, and not through rose-colored glasses, but is willing to give you up on holiday weekends and get over the idea that we've always done this during the summer or we've always done this at Christmas time, because there may be a change, as Chuck has suggested. So those would be, I guess, my first reactions. I've got a book. Can I mention a book?
Please do. Please do.
One of the books they gave us first months in the process was a wonderful book called Ministry and the Family of the Permanent Deacon, written by a deacon's wife, Dottie Mraz, M-R-A-Z. The book is or was published by Liturgical Press, Lisa.
Okay.
And it is a wonderful, wonderful read for anybody that feels a little bit of a tug in this direction. And written from a wife's point of view, it was her participating with him all the way through the process until he became a deacon. There's some tears to be shed if you read this book, and I don't want to spoil it, but I would recommend, if anybody's interested, that they try to find a copy. Email me if they have trouble.
And we'll definitely have a link to that in our show notes as well for the show. That sounds like a terrific resource. Deacon Chuck, how would you answer that question, just about what you might say to somebody who's considering life as a permanent deacon?
Well, I think the point that Deacon Tom made about the docility, we've warped that word, the meaning of that word in the 20th and 21st centuries to mean you're a pushover and you're weak, and docile is a bad thing to be. Docile really means, in its pure sense, just being open. And that's the whole point, is you have to be open to discern what it is that God really wants you to do, where God wants to take you. And if you're willing to say yes to that, too often we get this idea that, well, I've got these natural gifts, obviously God is calling me to this. And what that turns into is we dictate to God where he's calling us. And that's a guaranteed recipe for disaster. If you go with the idea that you're forming your vocation according to what you think is best, not necessarily what God is speaking to you in your heart, which also includes discerning and listening to your spiritual director, that's absolutely, you're guaranteed to be miserable in ministry, and if you're miserable in ministry, you're doing nothing but damage. I think that's first and foremost, is that whole idea of being docile. Second of all, I just want to touch on the spousal aspect of it, too. In our program, and I assume it's the same in Deacon Tom's, before you can be ordained, the last stage is that your wife has to write a letter granting her permission for you to be ordained to the bishop. Without that permission, you will not be ordained. And during our formation program, if for any reason at some point your spouse wants you withdrawn from the program, you're out. Because it's got to be understood and recognized, too, that although you are the one being ordained and you are the one that is going to stand in, quote-unquote, the line of fire, it really is a family decision. It can't be an independent decision in isolation from your family, because that's so important. I can't recall who it was that said it, but it was a deacon who's been ordained for a number of years and has written a couple of books. But he remarked to a gathering at the seminary that your first spiritual director as a permanent deacon is your wife. And if you don't listen to her, you're not going to listen to anybody, least of all God. So, and again, if we're discussing books, there is one that I would highly recommend for anybody who's even thinking in this direction, and it's by another deacon. I sometimes wonder whether I should refer to him as Deacon Doctor, because he does have a Ph.D., is Bill Ditewig, Ditewig, and he's written a book, I believe it's 101 Questions and Answers about deacons.
I was actually fortunate enough to interview Dr. Ditewig shortly after that book came out, and we'll definitely link to that in our show notes because it's a terrific resource.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Question and answer format, but also just very insightful about his own process and what you can expect in contemplating the diaconate. So.
Well, exactly. And the one quote I love from his book, if I can just throw that out
Please
there too,
do.
is that when the question is put to him, is the permanent diaconate a response to the priest shortage? His response is no, the permanent diaconate is a response to the shortage of deacons. I was looking at statistics the other day, and I stand to be corrected, but by the end of 2007, there was 1.2 billion, with a B, nominal Catholics in the world. Okay, so 1.2 billion people claim Catholicism. Of that population, there was about 409,000 priests, so roughly one priest for every 3,000 Catholics. Permanent deacons in the world, there was just over 35,000. So there was one deacon for one deacon for over 40,000 Catholics. So I think we need a little bit of work here to catch up.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being our guests today, Deacon Tom Fox and Deacon Chuck Stevens, and both of them have wonderful websites that we'll link to in our show notes. Deacon Tom can be located at www.deacontomonline.com, and you can find Deacon Chuck at www.smalltalentmusic.com. And I'm going to speak for both of you in saying that I'm assuming you'd like to hear from our listeners if they have additional questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa, so very much.
Most definitely. Thanks so much, Lisa. Thank you, Deacon Tom.
What I'd like to do is just invite anybody who does have questions about today's conversation either to post a note in the comments where you listen to the show or to get in touch with the deacons directly. And I know that they'll welcome your thoughts about our conversation today, but also any questions that you might have about formation and your own possible vocation to the permanent diaconate. And who knows, maybe we'll find a deacon out of this conversation. So
wonderful.
That would be a wonderful blessing for our community and for all the parishes out there. So I'd like to thank both of you for your time today, and I hope we can follow this up with a subsequent conversation at some point in the future. And I want you both to know that I pray every day for you and your ministry and for all the wonderful work that you're doing. I thank you on behalf of all the people that are listening for the way that you've touched our lives.
God bless. Thank you.
Have a great day.
God bless.
God bless. Bye-bye.
I'd like to say a big thank you to both of the deacons, Deacon Tom Fox and Deacon Chuck Stevens, for the time that you've spent sharing with us about the permanent diaconate. We'll have links in our show notes to the books that were mentioned in this conversation, and also contact information for both deacons in case you feel inspired to get in touch with them and continue the conversation. And I'd love to have them back again at some point in the future to have more discussion around this topic. I think it's just such a wonderful topic, and I, again, want to thank them for their time. And I'd like to close out today's podcast with another song from Deacon Chuck Stevens. This is the title track from his new CD entitled Harvest of Love. And you know, Deacon Chuck is so generous, he's actually giving this CD away for free. If you head over to his website at smalltalentmusic.com, you can download all of the tracks from the Harvest of Love CD, and it's really a tremendous tremendous spiritual boost to me to listen to his music, and I hope you enjoy it as well. And until next week, I'd love your feedback. Drop me a line anytime to lisa@catholicmom.com. Be my friend on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, Lisa Hendey, Hendey. And of course, we'd love your feedback on the blog, anywhere where you listen, catholicmoments.com, catholicmom.com, SQPN.com, or any of the places where you might be listening to this podcast. And finally, you can call our voice feedback line anytime at 206-339-9272 if you've got an event, a podcast, or blog that you'd like us to help promote, or if you just have some feedback on the show. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, everyone, I hope you enjoyed Deacon Chuck Stevens singing Harvest of Love. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Here is a harvest of love. From all of the bounty you've granted, we give back to you. Here is a harvest of love we offer to you with our neighbor, the fruits of our labor, the work of our hearts and our hands. From the flocks of our dreams and ambitions, from the fields of our struggles and trials, we will give you the best that our lives have to offer, for you've given us all of our lives. Yes, you've given us all of our lives. Here is a harvest of love. From all of the bounty you've granted, we give back to you. Here is a harvest of love we offer to you with our neighbor, the fruits of our labor, the work of our hearts and our hands. From our storehouse of hopes and intentions, from the wells of compassion and care, we will share with the poor and the weak and the lonely, for you've given us all that we share. Yes, you've given us all that we share. Here is a harvest of love. From all of the bounty you've granted, we give back to you. Here is a harvest of love we offer to you with our neighbor, the fruits of our labor, the work of our hearts and our hands. Here is a harvest of love. From all of the bounty you've granted, we give back to you. Here is a harvest of love we offer to you with our neighbor, the fruits of our labor, the work of our hearts and our hands.
SQPN, leading the way in Catholic new media.